Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mindset Money Success. And I'm your host, Loraine Marshall. And today I'm wanting to tell a little bit of background story about what happened when I was in the civil court in a precarious eviction. Because today, well, June 2024 is 2 years from the date of the actual court hearing was held on the 10th of June. And so being the 2 years anniversary from that, I just thought I would do a little bit more of like the story of what happened. Basically, I had been filed the court papers from a former partner in January of 2022. He had sent me an email about 6 days after the new year to ask if I would accommodate some viewing. He'd obviously had someone who wanted to come to view the property because he wanted to sell it. And there'd already been a lot of, how can I say this, verbal aggression from him, manipulation, a lot of things had already passed over the time that he'd left. And so instead of basically replying straight away, I took some advice from a relationship coach before replying to that email. And I replied to that email and asked if he would honor his first agreement, then yes, I was okay to have these people come to view. And then a few days later, I get another email, and I'm sitting alone in the house, and I've just eaten my evening meal, and I thought, right, look, I'll just check my emails, and I see these emails have come in, and I thought, oh, opened them and read what was in the first one, and then my stomach just dropped because the attitude had it just changed from one email to the next email. And the attitude was that, have you not seen these court documents? You are now at a risk of the Guardia Civil turning up to the property, and you would be asked to leave with just your personal possessions. So from the first email, which was with Happy New Year, Loraine, and all of the, niceties, I'd gone from that to completely the opposite. And I was like shoved back in a space of fear again, and feeling really sick to the pit of my stomach reading that email. And he said that he had attached the court documents in another email. So obviously I found the other email, and sure enough, he had attached the court documents, which had been waiting to be delivered, I guess, and hadn't been delivered because he'd started the process 6 months prior in 2021. So I then took that email with the court documents. The next day I forwarded to the lawyer who had initially seen, who had helped or tried to help me after my partner had left in October of 2020. This lawyer had tried to help me, and I forwarded this email, and he came back to me and said, no, the court have to deliver the documents, not my former partner. And he suggested that I collect those court documents in order to stop the process and start the process of obtaining free legal defense. And that's what I did. So I did get a free legal defense, and that's another story. But the actual court hearing went ahead on June the 10th. Prior to that, I had been to the court 5 days before. Even though I had a lawyer, she didn't seem to be helping. And I'd gone to the court because I had documents and evidence that I wanted to submit. I didn't even know the process, or I just thought, well, look, if that lawyer's not going to help, I'll go to the court. They'll have to take my evidence. And I thought, right, okay, went there. And I was told I was too late to file evidence. I had this translator who is one of the security guards who speaks English, who came up to the court office with me and was trying to explain the situation. I did explain it, and the court official then advises that my lawyer, the free public lawyer, was not helping me. And so basically, she said the best thing to do is to sack the lawyer and make an official complaint. Now, it was just 5 days before the hearing, and so I was now in a totally confused, not knowing what should be done. This court official also said I need a translator. I should have a translator. And so I contacted the court translator who had helped me in the gender violence case in October of 2020 and in January of 2021. I made contact again with this translator, and he said he could help me and he would be there on the day of the hearing, which in the civil court for precarious eviction is meant to be a verbal hearing. So I prepared a letter and a statement because I understood it was a verbal hearing. And so turned up to the court, hung about for a while. And even though my solicitor had said I wasn't entitled to bring a friend who could give me moral support, when my former partner appeared, he appeared with 2 other men who I guess were his legal representatives and translator, and his new wife. And they were all allowed into the courtroom. So I was on my own, and I had the translator who was with me and my lawyer who was on the stand. My partner's lawyer appeared by video link, I think, as far as I can gather. What happened? My lawyer said a few words. His lawyer said a few words. I didn't understand any of what was said. The judge banged down the hammer, and that was it. And that was it. There was no questions. I didn't get to speak. There was nothing. And I remember I had that letter. I took that letter and I walked forward to the desk where the judge was sitting and put that letter down onto the desk and returned back to the chair to gather my things. Then my lawyer ran over to the desk, snatched that letter, ran back to me and handed it back. And I stood in the courtroom and said, what just happened? What just happened? Because I hadn't a clue. Nobody explained anything. And I didn't understand what they'd said. So how could I defend myself when I didn't understand anything? It was a farce, basically. 5 minutes. The thing is, I couldn't understand why at first my partner's ex-partner's lawyer had requested that he appear by video conference. My ex-partner would appear by video link. And I was informed of that through my solicitor. Now he's there, haven't had to fly all the way from the UK, book hotels and everything to be there at a court, which is meant to be a verbal hearing. And there wasn't any discussion, nothing, no verbal hearing. There wasn't any statements, nothing. So as I'm stood in the middle of the court saying, what just happened? Right? The judge looks at me, and then the judge points his finger to the door and says, out, out. Because if I didn't leave the room, he was going to call the police or the Guardia Civil. And so I made my way out of that court. And I, at that time, I guess, being in shock and quite emotional about what had just happened and very angry, I think. And so that was how the court went. And it was just, for me, unbelievable that they'd made a request to say, no, this plaintiff can't appear by video link, and make him fly all the way from the UK to be present in Spain at this hearing. And the hearing lasts for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. I just could not fathom what was the point of that, to be honest. So the eviction was basically stamped and said, yep, that's it. But I made complaints. I said it hadn't gone properly. There wasn't any questions, this, that, the other. I didn't sack that lawyer. I should have done at the time, but I didn't. And the lawyer came back, my defense lawyer, and said, I'll be able to appeal. I'll give you more time to find somewhere to go. And I'm like, what? So like, you can't have two different conflicting pieces of advice when you've been told stay in the property, negotiate. So you stay in the property, you negotiate. Only you can't negotiate with a person who's not willing to negotiate. And even when they've agreed to something, that they'll turn their back on the agreement and pretend that nothing's happened. So that is just not nowhere happening when somebody is like that, when you're trying to come to some sort of a settlement or an out of court settlement. It doesn't happen. So now this free public lawyer is saying, yeah, we can appeal. And that's what she does. And it gives them more time. But even after the appeal's dismissed because there's no evidence. There's no evidence that has been put forward. So 3 different judges are looking at the case when there's no evidence, which is pointless. And it was just an exercise to say, tick the box, we've appealed, but that wasn't the point. And after that, it still didn't go through. And I was expecting that I would have to leave the house by September or October of 2022. And it didn't happen. So I'm still here in June of 2024. I'm still in the property, still trying to get some sort of resolution, some sort of justice for everything that's happened. And hello, and before we move on to the next part of the podcast, I just want to interrupt the show to show you some of the t-shirt designs I've created to support my podcast. All of these designs are available on Amazon. I've got 10 designs in total, and if you go to the website link on my successwithloraine.com website, you'll be able to have a look at the different designs that are available. Take a look. I hope you like them. I just want to read a chapter or go over a chapter from my first self-published book, because for me it's important to get this message out. And so this is the chapter which I put in my book, and it's called Living Together Laws in UK and Spain. So here we go. Cohabiting statistics UK. The obvious trend is for more and more couples to live together without getting married. Cohabiting couples, families, were the second largest family type at 3.5 million, followed by lone parent families at 2.9 million. Now, this statistics is from trendmonitor.co.uk, taken February 2020. Laws that offer no protection for couples and particularly disadvantage women in cohabiting relationships. Married couples who divorce can have their property legally divided. Unmarried couples do not have the same rights without proof of ownership. So, for example, when one partner, usually the man, is named on the deeds to the house and the other party, the woman, is not, but she has contributed in some way over the years. If they split up, she has no legal protection. There's no automatic right to inheritance unless a will has been created. There's also no rights to pension between cohabiting couples. So what protection is available? 1. Couples can have a cohabitation agreement drawn up. 2. When purchasing a property together, they can ensure both names are on the deeds of the family home, or draw up a declaration of trust, and if ownership is to be in unequal shares. 3. Take out life insurance, and creating a will is also a good idea. When couples meet and decide to move in together, the last thing that they're thinking about is what will happen if you separate, or if one partner should die unexpectedly. But this conversation should take place. It's very important to be clear on what is intended when you are forming a new cohabiting relationship. If you do not put some simple protections in place at the start of a relationship, can leave one or both partners in precarious situations. In my case, despite the ex-partner declaring the property to be our first home and him making his will to ensure I would have some protection if he died unexpectedly, I was not named on the deeds. When he terminated the relationship the way he did and left me floundering in Spain in the property he had purchased for our retirement together, I was in a precarious position as soon as he threatened me with eviction. He had been responsible for paying all of the bills at the property, and most of which were on direct debits from his bank account, even though he offered what he termed gifts in his financial settlement letter. Nothing he offered was given, and nothing was legally signed. Philip had power and control of that. However, because of his inability to have an adult conversation, he ended up being responsible for the utilities, the house tax, insurance at the property after he'd left in 2020. In Spain, an owner cannot terminate the utilities at the property when it is occupied, even if that occupation is by squatters. Due to his refusal to negotiate or help me by paying an advance payment to redeem my UK mortgage, I was left in a financial predicament. This may not have been too much to bear, but the stark realization of his abusive behaviour, the sudden termination of our relationship, and then understanding that I had been involved with a man that showed no empathy nor compassion, and then blamed me for the situation he left me in. That caused me more emotional trauma than anything else. I was coming to terms with the fact of having been in an emotionally and psychologically abusive relationship. That hurt me deeply, as memories of the twisted things he did and said were popping into my mind. His cruel, hurtful, verbal outburst and the sadistic sexual acts that I was manipulated and conditioned to accept. It was all too much. I was close to complete emotional breakdown on several occasions in the weeks and months that followed his departure from the villa. So, what are the issues that couples need to consider? Talking about and planning your future doesn't mean that you are expecting to split up. It's just a sensible way of entering a huge commitment and making sure you are protected should the worst happen. The property in which you live is always going to be the biggest concern, and unless you are clear from the outset about how you co-own, co-tenant, or co-occupy any property, then things can get pretty messy if the relationship hits the rocks. If your name isn't on the deed and there's no evidence of any agreement between the two of you, then it's going to be very difficult to claim an interest in your home. It would be very unwise for someone to make significant investment or a contribution into a property that's owned by their partner unless there is a very clear understanding between them as to what interests they may have in that home. If you are to have children together, consider what arrangement you want to put in place for their security as they grow. Avoid casual conversations. Don't assume just because you've talked things through that everything's going to be fine. All too often, people who have sadly lived their relationship on trust, and when one partner betrays the other and terminates the relationship, that trust you once had has turned out to be meaningless when it comes to legal rights. On the other side of the coin, be careful about making promises, as that could be used as evidence of an agreement if you break up. Of course, relationships are built on trust, and it can be very difficult to bring that subject up. However, it's worth remembering that when things are rosy, everything seems fine, but the situation and the picture can change very quickly when the relationship turns sour. If things are not set out in an agreement, you will be relying on who said what and when. Then, if you end up in a dispute, a judge will decide whose word is to be believed. That can end up very costly and very uncertain in terms of outcome, and therefore it makes a lot of sense to have honest discussions from the start, so you both know where you stand on this. Couples often don't make provisions. They don't realise the importance of having a legal contract. And as the law stands, they are disadvantaged, and there's no protection. If one partner dies, there's no automatic inheritance rights. If the relationship ends, then a division of property and pensions is not covered by current laws. Settlements out of court are better. What I very quickly discovered is just how many gaps there are in the laws. Firstly, in living together with no legal certificate, and secondly, in the process of making a complaint against my now ex-partner for gender violence while living in Spain. Fundamentally, it is women who are disproportionately disadvantaged in this scenario. Lawyers don't come cheaply. You can obtain initial free advice, but that advice offers no real answers, and then to actually instruct an international lawyer that will work between Spain and the UK, I was quoted £1,000 deposit and then advised that if they were to take on my case, the fees could be anywhere from £5,000 upwards. Money I just did not have and was not willing to commit to spending. Because the law does not have specific remedies in cases like these, a dispute between two people who were previously in a relationship, for example, where the man is in control of the finances and the woman becomes wholly dependent, there's no law that takes into account any contribution that women make in the homemaking, caring, and in other non-earning capacity. So the reality is that as it stands, the law is not fit for purpose. The gaps in the law have been likened to ravines. Of course, couples who decide to live together could opt to form a civil partnership, an option that is available to opposite and same-sex couples. So by registering a civil partnership, it will give your relationship some legal recognition and added legal rights. Living together in Spain. Registering para de hecho. What does para de hecho mean? Roughly translated, it is an official couple and is equivalent to a civil union. It gives couples many of the advantages of being married without many of the obligations. Each autonomous community has its requirements for registering para de hecho. Plus, there are some legal qualifications. For example, at least one person in the relationship must be registered in the autonomous community where the union will be registered. Each person must also legally be single and not married to any other person. So each person has to prove that they are divorced, legally separated, or widowed. You must not be related to each other, and you need to be over the age of 18. And you need to show that you have lived together for 12 uninterrupted months. Plus, you must be mentally capable of entering into an official relationship status. You should be aware that in Spain, the law does not currently automatically recognise a claim on property and assets between unmarried couples. So if you are going to reside in Spain as a couple living together, you should make the necessary plans to either register a formal relationship or actually get married. The title of my book, Post-Separation Abuse, Betrayal and Abandonment, What Type of Man, caused a former partner to take criminal action against me in the Spanish courts. Reasons why I self-published this book was to raise awareness of hidden emotional and psychological abuse that can happen in relationships, highlighting the gaps in the laws and how the system can fail those who need protection, how the laws concerning separation of couples who are cohabiting are not fit for purpose, and how cohabiting couples do not have the same legal rights as married couples or those in civil partnership, to show how, after the end of a relationship, abuse can continue in what can be termed post-separation abuse when one party in a relationship chooses conflict over discussion and negotiation. How the legal system can be used by the offender to further cause emotional and financial devastation to the victim. Emotional and psychological abuse comes under the term coercive control in the UK, a law that was passed in March 2015 and came into force on 29th of December 2015. Victims of abuse often know that something's happened to them and it isn't right, but they don't understand that it was domestic abuse and that is now illegal. For all women who didn't survive, those who were not able to get through the trauma and gave up on themselves and their future, more needs to be done to raise awareness and protect those who suffer this hidden emotional and psychological abuse. Domestic violence is a factor in up to 1/4 of female suicide attempts. Facts on post-separation abuse. In the year ending March 2020, an estimated 2.3 million adults aged between 16 and 74 years experienced domestic abuse. 1.6 million women and 750,000 men, and these figures published 2022. As an update to my published book for this article, unfortunately, attributing suicide directly to domestic violence can be difficult due to the complexity of contributing factors. However, we can look at resources and understand a bigger picture. In the UK, a total of 242 domestic abuse-related deaths were recorded between April 2022 to March 2023, including 93 suspected victim suicides following domestic abuse, 80 intimate partner homicides, and 31 family homicides. And these figures are quoted from the NPCC and dated March 13th, 2024. I will include a link in the show notes for that. I believe it is important to note that that report I've just quoted indicates the following risk factors: controlling and coercive behaviour, mental ill health, alcohol use, drug use, and separation or ending of a relationship. So all of those things are quoted as risk factors. In Spain, there does not seem to be any equivalent statistics in Spain for suspected victim suicides following domestic abuse or gender violence. My recommended reading for professionals in the field of supporting victims of domestic violence is a book called In Control: Dangerous Relationships and How They End in Murder. Professor Jane Monckton Smith, a former police officer and internationally renowned professor of public protection, has developed a groundbreaking research into an 8-stage homicide timeline, lays out the identifiable stages in which coercive relationships can escalate to violence and murder. Here are the 8 stages. 1. A pre-relationship history of abuse or stalking. 2. A whirlwind romance and then marriage or a serious relationship. 3. Elements of domination and coercive control. 4. A threat to the perpetrator's control. Relationship ends or financial issues. 5. There's an escalation in the control tactics. And that could be stalking or threatening behaviours. 6. The perpetrator has a change in thinking, seeks revenge or homicide. 7. The planning stage, seeking opportunities to get a victim alone or might buy weapons. 8. The homicide. The perpetrator kills the victim and possibly harms others, such as the victim's children. So if you are concerned about domestic violence or suicide for yourself or someone you know, please reach out to a crisis hotline or a support organisation. In Spain, the 016 anonymous national helpline for victims of gender violence. In the UK, the emergency services is 999 and the Samaritans are 116 123, and that's a 24/7 confidential support. So this has been my podcast episode for this week, and thank you for listening, and bye for now.